Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with a midweek update in the world of cannabis. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos, but then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you choose to do so. And today we're going to start with this very accurate meme from Kevin Carrillo, so thank you, Kevin, for making this. And he's also a resident of New Mexico, and he hosts the Cannabinoid Connect podcast, so I imagine he's been anticipating this for a while, but this does speak volumes when he highlights the face you make when the newest economic sector in the state you're governing generates $5.2 million in the first weekend of sales. And I wasn't sure if that was the face based on the number of sales or the fact that she realized, wait, all this has to be done in cash and we can't actually collect any of these payments electronically. Either one of those I think does apply, but when you consider that the population of New Mexico is just 2 million people, that is very impressive. And so I wanted to start with that, but thank you NatsFertig for sharing this one, as New Mexico raked in more than 5 million in the opening weekend of recreational cannabis sales. Smooth adult use cannabis launch brings economic boom to the state. As adult use cannabis sales totaled 5.2 million over the first weekend of sales, the Cannabis Control Division of the Regulation and Licensing Department reported Monday. Friday, the first day of sales, was nearly double Colorado's first day of adult use sales, which is very impressive. From my understanding, Friday they had done 2 million already, and then they carried that over into the weekend. New Mexico's launch of recreational cannabis has been one of the most successful, if not the most, of any state, said Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham. Not to mention that we beat Colorado's numbers for first day sales. New Mexicans demonstrated the strength of the demand for this exciting new industry, and that's going to be for every other state that does reform their laws as well. And it is clear that adult use cannabis is going to be a contributor to our diverse state economy. Between midnight on Friday, April 1, and 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, April 3rd, cannabis retailers made 5.2 million in sales with medical and adult use purchases combined. Adult use sales alone brought in 3.5 million, and medical cannabis generated 1.6 million. All the dollars came from 87,773 individual transactions from every corner of the state. So we love to see that the demand is strong. And while obviously not all of the purchases are going to come from New Mexico residents, I just wanted to share this snippet from an article that Shamps shared. So thank you, Shamps, for sharing this, because I just did find it quite interesting, because it seems like whoever was featured in this article mentioned that they did a study. Now, I don't think this is reflective of what actually happened over the past weekend, but their study shows that they think over time, 40 to 42% of all adult use cannabis will be derived from out-of-state purchases, particularly Texas. So all this is to say is that states around will help drive more sales in New Mexico. Now, we don't know if this is exact, obviously, because it's a study and not relative to real data that we've pulled over time, but it obviously is going to help the growth in the state. So I wanted to share that, as it is interesting. And then lastly, in case you missed the video from my last week's video, this is what it looked like to stand and wait out line for your first legal purchase of adult use cannabis in New Mexico. So again, just happy to say that that launch was a success. And on to this one from Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation, as Illinois' adult use cannabis monthly sales figures are released for the month of March. And we did see the second best month ever on record, with over 3 million items sold, 90.3 million in in-state resident sales, and 40.5 million in out-of-state resident sales, for a total of 130.9, or basically 131 million for the month of March. And this was a big jump up from a bit of a laggy January. And while February certainly was better than January, it's good to see March jump back up. And if we were to compare to March last year, where they did 109 million sales, that's roughly a 20% increase year over year. So good to see that growth continue, or good to see that growth, especially when you consider the fact that Illinois has the same amount of dispensaries right now that they did in March of last year. And so when you consider we're still seeing strong growth from the same amount of stores, and the fact that Illinois did approve 185 extra licenses, yet those dispensaries haven't been approved to open yet because of litigation, from my understanding, just goes to show that the demand is growing. And obviously once those 185 extra dispensaries come online, boom, that's really going to be opening the floodgates in Illinois. And so on to this one, we did get some news out of Marijuana Moment, as the House passes a bipartisan cannabis research bill to let scientists study dispensary products days after legalization vote. So it is nice to see the momentum continue, as the U.S. House of Representatives on Monday approved a bipartisan cannabis research bill that's meant to streamline studies into cannabis, in part by allowing scientists to access products from state legal dispensaries. And so this is one workaround, as opposed to just descheduling the plant, which I think everybody wants and knows is probably the best course of action for the American people. The Medical Cannabis Research Act, sponsored by the unlikely duo of pro-legalization rep Earl Blumenauer and prohibitionist rep Andy Harris, passed the House in a 343 to 75 vote. And so what does this bill actually do? Got to find the snippets where it actually explains it. So the legislation would remove barriers for researchers seeking to apply apply and get approved to study cannabis. It would also set clear deadlines on federal agencies to act on their applications and also make it easier for scientists to modify their research protocols without having to seek federal approval. So it would make research a lot easier, which is certainly very important. The House bill, meanwhile, would additionally mandate that the Drug Enforcement Administration license more growers and make it so there would be no limit on the number of additional entities that can be registered to cultivate cannabis for research purposes. It would also require the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to submit a report to Congress within 5 years after enactment to overview the results of federal cannabis studies and recommend whether they warrant cannabis's descheduling under the federal law. Like we don't have enough studies already, and like the Schaefer Commission in 1972 recommended to the Nixon administration, we ought to stop criminalizing and consider descheduling this so we could research it. They didn't listen then. What are the chances that they're going to listen now, right? And so again, we need the American people to make some noise and put pressure on the politicians if we want change sooner than later. So I don't see that all being great, but regardless, I'll keep going. Under the House bill, the agency would be forced to start approving additional cultivation applications for study purposes within 1 year of the legislation's enactment, while HHS and Attorney General would be required under the bill to create a process for cannabis manufacturers and distributors to supply researchers with cannabis from dispensaries. They would have 1 year after enactment to develop that procedure and would have to start meeting to work on it within 60 days of the bill's passage. While lastly, in general, the legislation would also establish a simplified registration process for researchers interested in studying cannabis, in part by reducing approval wait times, minimizing costly security requirements, and eliminating additional layers of review protocol. While it might be positive awareness for the American people, I think the most important thing would be to see the Dems actually keep some of the promises that they made to the American people. And so happy to relay this. As Tom Engel shared today, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said he is reaching out to Republicans again to see what they want included in a federal cannabis legalization bill. He hopes to file, again, previously he said he would file on 420, now he's changing his wording. He hopes to file towards the end of April with Senators Cory Booker and Ron Wyden. So while time is running out and the Dems made a lot of promises on this issue that they have failed to keep, I really hope Schumer can pull something off and he does prove me wrong from now until November. But it is just shameful when you consider that he could have passed the Safe Banking Act a year ago and made America a lot safer and saved many American lives. And where in this instance the person didn't actually die, but the employee gets pistol whipped during an Everett pot shop robbery because they have to deal in cash and that makes them targets. And so this is becoming an issue for apparently the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which is an agency of the U.S. Department of Labor. And we know dozens of robberies have been reported at pot shops across the state. Those robberies have become more violent and recently deadly. And sadly, Schumer could fix this, but he chooses to wait. And that, again, costs American lives. And so whenever they tell you that they care about the human lives, remember that their actions speak a lot louder than their words. So I wanted to share this one from MJBizDaily as it summarizes a lot of good info. The U.S. cannabis MSO revenue surges in 2021, fueled by expansion and acquisitions. And so we can see right here, the top U.S. multi-state operators reported strong revenue growth from 2020 to 2021, despite, all the moving parts and difficult circumstances to operate under, but several reported large losses. And so you can see the snippet here. We've got Curaleaf, Trulieve, Green Thumb Industries, and Trulieve and Green Thumb were the only ones to post profits for the entire full year. Then we've got Cresco Labs, Columbia Care, Air Wellness, Ascend Wellness, and Verano. And so just a bit of info. The top cannabis multi-state operators in the U.S. posted huge revenue gains in 2021 over the previous year as they expanded in high-growth markets and filled gaps in their geographic footprints through small and large acquisitions. And in many cases, revenue nearly doubled or more than doubled from 2020, while MSOs continued to take more of the overall U.S. market share of U.S. sales. So for example, two big companies, Green Thumb and Florida's Trulieve Cannabis, managed to turn a profit in 2021, while by contrast, several companies like Cresco Labs and New York-based Columbia Care reported large losses as they increased production, opened up new stores, and acquired additional licenses or operations in key markets. While hefty income tax bills reflecting Section 280 of the federal tax code also undercut all of the company's bottom lines, and despite the revenue boom for all of 2021, cannabis sales grew only modestly in the last 3 months of the year, continuing a trend from the previous quarter, with some industry officials noting that consumers have less disposable income to spend. They also don't mention Croptober, which is another big part of that. They just don't. They leave it out of the article. And the slower pace follows a coronavirus-driven sales boom in 2020 that was fueled by federal stimulus checks and consumers turning to cannabis for stress relief, among other factors. And so main thing to highlight is that revenue is going up in the right direction. While companies did suffer a loss, while you're a fast-growing company in one of the largest emerging markets in the U.S., you're going to suffer a loss while you're paying to expand expand and become one of the industry leaders in time. So happy to report that. Well, I wanted to share this one from Todd Harrison. As U.S. cannabis, if we look at their enterprise value divided by projected sales for 2022, then for next year, 2023 and 2024, they are trading at such low multiples. And so do keep in mind, I don't believe any of these projected sales include New Jersey, New York, or Connecticut yet, since they haven't launched their programs. But keep in mind, once they do launch their programs, that will expand the total addressable market by at least 30 million people just based on their populations alone. So of course, as states do reform their laws, the projected sales will slowly be able to increase as the total addressable market organically increases over time. So keep that in mind while remembering that the cannabis industry is still in its infancy. It is a high growth sector, although it's not treated like it since it doesn't trade on major exchanges, but it is, and it's one of the fastest emerging markets in the US that is American made, and they don't outsource. So obviously I think those are driving factors that will lead to their success over time as well. But let's just say, for example, all the MSOs in 2022, based on their current valuations right now and projected sales, were trading at a 3x. So just want to share this as a prime example. If we were to compare it to some S&P 500 companies and looking at their price to sales ratio and how they get traded on major exchanges, let's just compare it to Microsoft. If these MSOs traded at the same price to sales as Microsoft, and keep in mind, Microsoft's a mature company. They're not growing nearly as quickly as the MSOs would be right now, but the MSOs would re-rate and they would 4x from 3x to 12x, just like that. That would mean their share price would multiply by 4. Just like that. So for example, Tesla, a high growth industry, American made, if MSOs traded on major exchanges, not saying that this would happen, but it could, as Tesla is trading at a price to sales ratio of 20.24. Now obviously the MSOs are smaller companies than Tesla. They're not there yet, as Tesla is likely much more mature in a sense compared, but just to highlight that if the MSOs were to go from 3x to 20x, obviously that's a massive re-rating from where their current valuations are now. And so we don't know when this is going to happen, folks. So do your best to plan accordingly for your own situation. Probably plan for the worst and hope to be pleasantly surprised from now until November. Well, I wanted to share this one from Todd Harrison, as he shares that apparently on Wednesday and Thursday, so today and tomorrow, at the Lion's Den, which is BTIG, I believe, there is the BTIG Global Cannabis Conference. And so we just have the list of companies that will be speaking on here. So this will be Wednesday, April 6th, the agenda. So you can just pause to read if you want to see. Thursday, April 7th, the agenda. And I believe there is another participating companies, one-on-ones, and then group meeting as well. So all the companies that will be participating are listed here, so you can pause to read or grab the link below. But on to some MSO news as Trulieve announces exclusive partnership with Delisioso Cannabis in Florida. So they're happy to announce on the 4th that they have an exclusive partnership in Florida with Delisioso LLC, a cannabis marketing and consulting company specializing in high-end adult use and medical cannabis products. Through the agreement, Trulieve becomes the exclusive producer, processor, and retailer of Delisioso branded products throughout the state, with Flamingo Kush by Delisioso pre-rolls launching on April 15th. So I imagine this is a top seller, and that is why Trulieve wants to bring them on exclusively. So a bit more about the brand. Delisioso is a Florida-based cannabis brand founded by Richard DeLisi and his son Rick. Richard DeLisi is one of the longest-serving non-violent cannabis prisoners in U.S. history, having served 32 years of a 90-year sentence. And that is the kind of story that can move you. The Delisioso brand is committed to donating a portion of its profits to nonprofits, including FreeDelisi.com and the Last Prisoner Project, an organization that was instrumental in securing DeLisi's release in December 2022. So good on Trulieve partnering with a brand like this to raise awareness and releasing non-violent offenders from jail and prison as well. So hopefully this exclusive deal will do them well. Well, I wanted to share from Verano as they welcome Ohio medical patients to a new prime location for their Zenleaf Canton dispensary, as they're relocating from its former home in an industrial area on Steinbeck Boulevard to 3224 Cleveland Avenue Northwest, a busy thoroughfare situated just over 1 mile from the Pro Football Hall of Fame that sees average daily traffic of 18,427 vehicles per day. So good on them to move to a location that's going to serve them better in time, obviously, as you want more foot traffic than less. While Ohio medical cannabis sales are expected to generate more than $507 million in revenue through the end of 2022, and that's medical alone. But Ohio is contemplating putting cannabis on the ballot, and they do have lawmakers, I believe, that are pushing for an adult use bill as well. So we might see Ohio become one of the adult use states that legalizes in the coming years. So that will obviously be beneficial if that happens, as they're preparing for that. While Verano's Ohio footprint includes a cultivation and processing facility and 5 dispensaries. So this is one of those 5. While nationally, the company's active operations span 13 states, comprised of 95 dispensaries and 12 cultivation and processing facilities with more than 1 million square feet of cultivation capacity. So smart to be proactive as opposed to reactive and move into a better location before it's too late. Well, I wanted to share this one from Reddit.com. As someone put together a consolidation information snippet with Cresco Labs and Columbia Care. Now, do not take this information as fact, as it's just someone that took all the information they could find online and did their best of a job to put the numbers together and come to some conclusions. But it is very helpful, especially if you are a Cresco Labs or Columbia Care shareholder. So I do recommend checking this out. If you own either of those, obviously it'll be very informative and just help you see some of what might happen behind the scenes to make this deal happen. And obviously it's good for both shareholders in time as we compete to be one of the biggest. And so on to this one from states, as Chris Norman shares an update from NewJersey.gov as the New Jersey Control Commission agenda is up for April 11th, which will be next week. This special meeting that they posted after they did not launch adult use sales from their last meeting, and the Senate president got very angry, and he said that it looks good. As we can see, number 6 on the docket, adult use cannabis consideration. Why wouldn't they just say approval of applications for conditional licenses, consideration of certifications for expanded alternative treatment centers? And so this is likely going to be the news that we've been waiting on and all the MSOs are waiting on, but we got to wait till April 11th to see if that happens. Well, this one comes from 10th Amendment Center. As another state, we see Missouri, their Senate passes a bill that would eliminate state conformity with the IRS Section 280E for cannabis businesses. So we do like to see this for MSOs in Missouri, but also at the same time, we would just love to see Safe Pass so that none of these businesses have to deal with it. So some more information, though, last week, the Missouri Senate passed a bill that include provisions that would eliminate the state's conformity with Internal Revenue Code Section 280E. The enactment of this provision would represent a small but important state tax relief for medical cannabis businesses despite ongoing federal cannabis prohibition. And so this would only apply to medical cannabis businesses as it is not legal yet in Missouri as well. And so it only helps a small portion of obviously the massive overall industry in the U.S. Senator Denny Hoskins introduced Senate Bill 807 on January 1. The legislation would make several changes to the state tax code, including a provision that would provide much-needed tax relief for medical cannabis businesses in the state. While provisions in SB 807 would allow taxpayers authorized under the Missouri Constitution to operate a business related to medical cannabis to claim an income tax deduction in an amount equal to any expenditures otherwise allowable as a federal income tax deduction, but that are disallowed for federal purposes because cannabis is a controlled substance under federal law. And so this is another interesting way that states can try and help MSOs within their state while, again, Congress delays on actually passing SAFE. And so just last update on this one, SB 807 will move to the House for further consideration. Once assigned to a House committee, it must get a hearing and then pass the committee by a majority vote before moving forward in the legislative process. So it's far from being passed, but again, it's just good to see more efforts from state lawmakers trying to help these MSOs in their state as Congress just delays and delays. Well, wanted to share this one out of South Carolina as Senator Lindsey Graham open to medical cannabis as Canna bill heads to the Senate. And I don't know much about Lindsey Graham. I've heard his name a lot, but he seems like a very hard-nosed red senator and someone that has been anti-cannabis in the past. And so he shares medical cannabis. I've heard from many people in our state seems to have some value. And while in South Carolina, I do believe that they will pass their medical bill, as obviously it would benefit many citizens in their state. We have some Republicans that are against it. And so obviously the more Republicans in South Carolina that are open to medical cannabis, the better for all of the residents in South Carolina that need medical cannabis. So I wanted to share this interesting interview with the WeedMaps CEO. And so this is the first I'll be sharing of him really on this page at all. But this is what he claims is the real problem, and that it's not federal illegality in the U.S. Or so the real problem with U.S. cannabis regulation, not from federal illegality. And so he says the single biggest issue facing legalized cannabis markets is that there's just not enough licenses, Beals told Yahoo Finance Live in the video above. So you can grab the link if you want to watch the video, adding that consumers are still choosing the illicit market over the legal one by a 4-to-1 ratio. And so this is very interesting to hear. And just to add, WeedMaps CEO, his full name is Chris Beals. So yeah, this is another take that we hadn't really considered, but that's probably a driving factor. As a result, a lot of the harm that's being inflicted is not from the federal illegality, Beals said. It's from states not issuing enough licenses to supply the demand, because the biggest correlating factor to these high illicit market rates is you have to drive too far or there's not enough robust competition on pricing or production in the selection. So that's an interesting take. As he adds, we've covered this one, so this is the snippet I want to get to. He explained that the growth of the industry remains dependent on licensing at the state level. The biggest reason is that the local not in my backyard-ism, that is what it is. NIMBY-ism, Beal said, most states that have legalized have left it up to local governments, which tend to be slower to move and more conservative. Are they any slower than the federal government? While NIMBY-ism, which stems from the acronym for not in my backyard, refers to local residents who oppose development projects in their area, which is ironic because over time, we've learned from states like Michigan, where if you actually allow cannabis dispensaries to open up near you, the value of your property actually increases increases. So people that think this way kind of shoot themselves in the foot for their property values, but regardless, Beal cited California's legal cannabis market as an example of this. And I'm happy that I'm learning more and more of this as we go, as even though California legalized in 2016, less than 25% of cities and counties have allowed legal cannabis businesses to open up there, he said. And so I think the interesting thing is New York and New Jersey to some degree are learning from this. Beal's continued. In New York, about 50% of cities and counties opted into allowing cannabis sales, and people bemoan that, saying, well, it's going to be an anemic market launch, that sort of thing. But people are forgetting that California is only about a 22% or 23% where there's enough, I would say, licenses to supply the demand, which would also mean that 78% of municipalities or local governments did not allow cannabis shops to open up. So newer markets are going to stem the tide. And so obviously, if we could see this, if licenses expanded in existing markets like California, that's something that we might not have considered, but that would be a massive organic driver to growth for this overall industry as well. So thank you for making that point, Chris Beals of WeedMaps. So on to this one from MJBizDaily. Just wanted to share, this is an interview that MJBizDaily did with Rep. Nancy Mace, prospects for federal cannabis reform, Q&A with GOP Rep. Nancy Mace. So I'm not going to go through it all, but you can grab the link below if you want to read through it and get caught up to speed. Well, this is a thread from a trader, Brianna Martin, but I did find this as she was talking about the most beatdown sector in the stock market for the past 15 months has been the American pot stocks. And yes, that is true, but it doesn't mean that the sector isn't one of the fastest growing and going to be one of the largest ones over the next decade. It is just the fact that we trade on the shipboards, and for that reason, these stocks can be easily manipulated until that flip switches and until we see the ride back up. Everyone that was a cannibal in early 2021 is now a bear, except for me. I'm still a cannibal. With prices and sentiment at all-time lows, I see this as the best risk reward of any sector in stock. And while I've been saying this for the last year and I was a year early, I don't think I'm wrong, because in reality, when the share price goes down, so does your market cap and valuation, which effectively decreases the risk when you enter your position there. But more importantly, you need to be invested in real businesses that have strong fundamentals, that are growing and have reason to continue to grow in the future. And I would say MSOs certainly fall in that category. And so for that reason, I do agree with her, but she's a trader, whereas I'm a long-term investor. So we have very different mindsets. But if you're a trader and you want to learn why she sees this as the best risk reward at this point for any sector, you can grab the link below and check it out. But I wanted to share a few more. We've got a study from MDPI as the impact of cannabinoid compounds on skin cancer, adding to the mounting evidence that this is medicine and that we ought to deschedule this plant so we can give this plant back to humanity and provide a safer, non-addictive alternative to opioids and crush that epidemic. As recent research has suggested that the endocannabinoid system offers several pharmacotherapeutic targets for drug administration as new options for the treatment and prophylaxis of skin cancer. So from my understanding, then, they also mean using cannabis or cannabinoids with the endocannabinoid system in our body. This review focused on the anti-carcinogenic mechanisms of cannabinoids at the different levels of skin cancer progression, such as inhibition of tumor growth, sounds like a good thing, proliferation, invasion, and angiogenesis, as well as inducing apoptosis and autophagy. So I apologize if I mispronounced any of those, but obviously more evidence we love to see, as it is time to deschedule, especially so we can stop the deaths from opioids. And lastly, just wanted to share this one from Todd Harrison as a bit of news out of Japan, the Far East. A study concluded that Japan's national revenue will increase if hemp is fully legalized. Obviously, if you legalize something, that means you have another stream of revenue you didn't have before, and that will certainly increase the national revenue that you'll bring in. So please, Japan, do it. I imagine that the people in Japan will be grateful that you did. And that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Friday for a video with Tilray's and Verano's recent earnings with some updates in the world of cannabis, and then I'll be back on Sunday for This Week in Cannabis News. So have a great week, everybody.